morning. Welcome back in. My name is Kris Johnson. It's my privilege to be the President and CEO of the Association of Washington Business. Before we get started this morning, I wanted to remind you of AWB's virtual Congressional Affairs Summit that will take place just next Tuesday. It's an opportunity for you to engage with 9 of our congressional members directly. So if you're interested in hearing about federal policy, federal support for employers and schools and states across the country, please join us next week. Your ability to do so is at awb.org/Federal Affairs Summit. So now for today's program, and it's great to be back here. We haven't had a program in about 6 weeks, so it's great to have each of you with us today as we talk about a really important conversation about what does returning to school look like. And for 3 of us on this call today, it's a personal item, not just a policy item, as we have 6 children between 3 of us today who are all probably wondering, what does that look like for this fall? So it's an important and timely conversation today, and I'm glad that our distinguished group of panelists could be with us today. We're going to talk about what does the 2021 school year look like, what's ahead for children going back to school or learning from home is still uncertain, and talk about what parents are left with, what major questions do they have, how do they get childcare during this important time, how does supervising their children take place, and most importantly, how do they learn from home in a virtual environment. Today, we'll have a discussion with K-12 and post-secondary leaders about the plans for the upcoming school year, what parents need to do to prepare, what businesses need to do to inform their employees, and to have the conversation together. As I mentioned, a distinguished group of 4 panelists with us today, Chris Reichdel, who's the superintendent for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, Paul Francis, the executive director of the Council of Presidents for the 4-year universities, Jan Yoshiwara, the executive director for the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, and Terri Standish-Kuon, president and CEO of the Independent Colleges of Washington. And so it's been a couple weeks since we've been together. A great reminder, what makes these programs so special is the opportunity for you to engage in the conversation and discussion. So a reminder, the GoToMeeting box is on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply go there, start inputting any questions you might have now into that box. Please identify who that question might be for, and we will have a chance to get through as many questions as possible. If it's typical of our other webinars, we're getting through about the first 20 questions or so, so please get those questions in early. So without further ado, let's get started. And our first speaker is on the front line of what does returning to school look like. It's Chris Reichdel, our Superintendent of Office of Public Instruction. Chris has served as a high school history teacher, a local school board member, a state legislator, a budget and policy executive for our state's community and technical college system, and leads a professional service team at OSPI that is working hard to open multiple pathways to high school students' graduation, including expanding technical education opportunities. Additionally, OSPI has transformed the state's accountability system through critical policy and budget challenges. Chris has dedicated his entire career to public education, and like the Johnson family, I'm sure his 2 children are wondering, what does this fall look like? So Chris, welcome on in. It's great to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Good to see everybody. Thank you very much for kind of tuning in today. I think the whole world's pretty zoomed out these days. It's been a complicated transition for everybody, but it's grateful that we constantly have this conversation. Things are very much in flux in our school system right now, and I think everyone's observing that. What was looking like really good numbers in May and June allowed us to put out opening guidance, really robust health framework for when our students come back in, hand hygiene, cleaning our facilities, screening every day, face coverings, and physical distancing. What really, truly the most robust framework we had seen in the country, gave way by June to significant growth again in cases. And I think what's happened now is a bunch of local public health officials have said, notwithstanding the really good guidance for how to do it well once kids are in buildings, they've said we want some metrics on when it is appropriate to put any kids in buildings. And so you're going to hear the governor unveil some of that later today. It sounds like a policy framework for when community spread is at a level that is, sort of low, medium, or high. It's still going to be a local decision about opening. So all of our guidance has still been about opening schools to in-person instruction. But I've always said we're simultaneously building something else here too, which is a new and much more robust and innovative way to deliver instruction at a distance. So learning management systems that are more consistent. For those of us with kids in school last year, you saw 5 different teachers with 5 different, learning systems. Districts are getting down to 1 or 2, depending kind of middle, high school, elementary in some cases. regular daily and weekly schedules for students, regular attendance check-in, professional development for teachers so they're really more successful at teaching remotely. They've been building curriculum or purchasing curriculum or partnering with third party. It's different to teach face-to-face than it is remotely. So we are preparing for a fall where if you are in a district that opens remotely, it is a significantly better experience. We've got money released now over the last 24 hours to connect upwards of 50,000 low-income families to pretty high speeds who had no connectivity last spring. So things are moving fast. It is such a dynamic world. So unfortunately, it seems like anything is only about 2 weeks old, and then we are constantly revisiting. But grateful to have the conversation today and look forward to questions.
Thank you, Kris. The questions are starting to come in. So we'll do 2 questions here and then 2 questions for each speaker and then a lightning round. Hey, Kris, the first question coming in picks up on your conversation around funding. And the question is there a likelihood that there will be funding issues for public schools in the upcoming year? What do you forecast on that?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this not technical. Most of the money that comes to our schools is constitutionally protected, and it's for instructional support. And so whether we're remote or hybrid models or face-to-face, that's in really good shape. What's really challenging for us right now is transportation. Obviously, if you're remote, you're not moving kids around, but you may be moving food around. You may be transporting some students. You may be bringing technology into neighborhoods. And so districts don't have an easy way to account for that or formula for that. And so we're having a real struggle right now reminding them that under the current model, it pays for transportation based on how many volumes of kids are on a bus, as opposed to whether the bus runs at all. Even if you're in a hybrid model running half your students, same fuel costs, same labor costs, same maintenance costs, but the funding formula would only send you half as much money. So they are really struggling in local districts on what to do with transportation. It's the one big question mark. I'm talking to legislators every week about that and saying you need to get in here, if not for special sessions, certainly in January, and make early action to give districts some confidence about the back half of the year. We can take care of the front half of the year a bit. The back half will be challenging.
Superintendent, the next question is a question about both schools that are in different phased counties. Do you see a pathway where schools may start virtually and transition at some point in the fall or winter break to in-person or a hybrid of in-person or virtually? And does that guidance, do you think, change based upon what phase the county's in?
It's an awesome question. I do anticipate some of that happening for sure, particularly if we can collectively wear our face coverings and get our cases down. What gets revealed today by the governor, my understanding is that it will put some framework around that. And so it won't really be about a phase, because that's been really confusing for some folks. It's really going to be about kind of what the caseload is in your community. So is it 25 on average per day over 14 days? Is it 50 to 75, or is it greater than 75? And again, it's not a mandate. It's not a top-down state decision. It's still local. But local health authorities really wanted something they could point to as they give guidance and counsel to local school district superintendents about their plans. So if you're a medium district, 25 to 75 average daily cases, and that's coming down, and by the second trimester, second semester, second quarter, you've met a critical threshold, you're going to start seeing districts saying, okay, we can start bringing back students. Many of them will focus on early grades, K3, K4, K5 when they do that.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. A lot of questions coming in. Some of these will be very individualized as we come into the lightning round of questions here, but stay with us and thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Paul Francis, the Executive Director of the Council of Presidents. Paul was born in Australia, but grew up in Tucson, Arizona. He's a first-generation college student and graduated from the University of Arizona with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. Upon relocating to Seattle, Paul has worked as a senior admission counselor at the University of Washington's Office of Admissions, where he managed campus tour programs and organized programs for admitted students and their families. He then served for 5 years as the lead policy staffer for the Washington State House Democratic Caucus on higher education policy and general government fiscal issues. Paul, it's good to see you. Welcome on in. Take it away, please.
Thank you, Kris. First of all, I want to thank Kris and the entire AWB team for allowing me to be here and to speak about this important issue. Thanks to our employers who play such a critical role in employing our students and meeting the needs of our state. My name is Paul Francis, as you heard, representing your 6 public four-year colleges and universities: Central Washington University, Eastern Washington University, the Evergreen State College, the University of Washington, Washington State University, and Western Washington University. I jotted down some notes here, so I want to make sure I get through everything. Also, if you don't get your question answered, please do reach out to me individually. I'm happy to take questions offline. I want to begin by just acknowledging the effects that the pandemic is having on all of our mental health. Many are feeling isolated, worried about their financial situation. There's a lot of frustration and anxiety out there, especially on the part of our educators, our students, parents. I think we should acknowledge that. I'm frustrated as well because my favorite part of this job is being on a college campus and interacting with students and faculty and really seeing the learning and the success that takes place. And we largely won't have that this fall. So I want to just put that out there. We in the higher education community are here to support you throughout your educational journey when you are in a time and a place to be ready for that. So just want to note that let's do everything we can to mentor and lift up our students, our faculty, our teachers, staff, everybody during this time. I'm really proud of our colleges and universities because we didn't close during the spring when the pandemic really started kicking into gear. We remained open, particularly with respect to research, hospital operations. We very quickly moved instruction online. So a huge thank you to all of our students, faculty, and staff who made that happen. In terms of plans for the fall, it's important to note that college and university leaders have been guided by science and data and by the safety of students, faculty, and staff. That's really paramount as we think about this. We were hopeful, as you heard from the superintendent, in late spring, based on the case counts, that we could offer a significant percentage of our classes in person for the fall. However, what we started to see in late May and June was an increase, widespread transmission, increase in the number of cases, better than a lot of other areas around the country, but still a growth in cases, which is concerning. Governor Inslee also paused counties advancing to the next stage of his phased approach and has continued that. Because my campuses are located around the state, we are in constant contact with local public health entities. We're also adhering to all state and local directives, as well as guidance from the Centers for Disease Control, the governor's office, and more. And you're going to hear a little bit about that guidance from my colleague, Terri Standish-Kuon at ICW. As a result, a number of my campuses have already announced that instruction will be delivered remotely for the fall. For undergraduate and graduate professional students, this includes Eastern Washington University, Washington State University, and Western Washington University. My other 3 campuses expect to make announcements in the coming days. So please do check out their COVID-19 web pages, follow them on social media. If you want links to those web pages, those are available on the Council of Presidents website. It's the first thing that shows up at the top when you click on there. Even when most classes are offered remotely, there are still some that will be in person. So some of our labs, some of our performance classes, studio, things like that. Our campuses have been busy, I would say busier than ever this summer, really working to provide professional development to our faculty and staff during this transition, really thinking about how we can reimagine the remote experience for students, peer-to-peer training on how to build community online, how to best access student learning, how to engage students, how to utilize various learning platforms and tools. Our goal is to provide as high quality of an experience remotely as we do on campus in person. A lot of questions have come in about residence halls. Residence halls will be operating this fall, albeit at a reduced capacity. That was true even in the spring. We have some students who have a need to live on campus. So, for example, international students, maybe who are housing insecure, foster youth, those type of students, and students who may have in-person classes on campus. What are some of the things we're doing with respect to housing? We're looking at things like single occupancy rooms, increased sanitation procedures in high traffic areas, isolation and quarantine spaces for students who have tested positive, and more. I also want to note that we provide a lot of student support services in higher education, whether we're talking about advising, tutoring, counseling, financial aid services. Those will continue to be offered remotely. during the fall, so those will not go away. We will be maintaining all of the same services that we provide for those campuses that offer remote education. We know a big barrier for students during the spring was technology, both in terms of broadband access and also equipment as well. WSU, for example, during the spring purchased 300 Chromebooks for students as well as 640 hotspots. You may have heard that WSU partnered with a variety of other entities, including OSPI, the Department of Commerce, the state libraries, Microsoft, the Vista, I'm probably missing a few, to provide 300 drive-in Wi-Fi spots across the state. So while that helps, I think that we have a great need for more broadband access in rural areas, a much broader issue. The superintendent has talked about this being really an essential service. It's an equity issue, and I completely agree with that. I think we've got a lot more work to do to make sure that we're bridging the digital divide and aren't leaving students behind during this time. I want to note for folks on this webinar that we know that a lot of family circumstances have changed, and that if you've had your hours reduced or your job impacted by the pandemic in any way, please reach out to our financial aid offices so that we can perhaps readjust your financial aid award. We don't want any students saying, gosh, I really wanted to be a Husky or a Coug or a Wildcat, but I just couldn't make it work. We will do whatever we can to serve you with the resources that we have. That includes some of the federal dollars that have come in through the CARES Act. We still have some of those monies available to assist students. So please do reach out. Also of our veteran students as well. We're a little bit worried that some of our veteran students have gotten the message that they can't be enrolling for the fall because of guidance from the federal government. And if you're a veteran or know a veteran student, please reach out to us, because you can still receive all of those same GI Bill benefits if you are fully remote. It is not a reduced level, as some believe. Dual credit students, I really want to get the message out to all of our amazing. Washington has an incredible selection of dual credit programs, from Running Start College in the high school, CTE dual credit, AP, IB, Cambridge. We've got this incredible selection, and many students don't know that those continue to be wonderful programs for students. So please do encourage students to pursue those opportunities, and know that colleges and universities in our sector will maintain the same awarding policies as in the past. I'll wrap it up here, Chris. I know I'm getting long. I very quickly want to say, with respect to admissions as well, we're providing a lot of flexibility to students in the admissions process. You're seeing colleges and universities in our state and across the country move to test optional, both for the class of 2021, but also permanently, which I think is a really a benefit to students. Also note to students that we will not negatively impact your admission if you're unable to get your transcript, or your senior year course changes, or you have a pass-fail grade. All of those things will not negatively impact you. So please reach out to us. We've partnered with the Independent Colleges of Washington to put a list together of contacts at each four-year college or university for freshmen or transfer students. That's available on the COP website. Please do reach out, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Paul, this is where I'm supposed to announce, hey, put your questions into the queue here, which you should do, but there's a lot of them, and let's start with the first one that you brought up, which is around financial aid. How do you see the financial aid offering changing, adapting, et cetera, whether it's federal support or state support?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that we're really lucky to be in Washington, which has a very robust student financial aid program. Policymakers have really stepped up to the plate with the Washington College Grant. So many students don't even know that they're eligible for student financial aid. Also, there's a selection of students who find it very difficult to even apply for financial aid, right, through the FAFSA. So what I would say to students is those programs are there for you. You may not think you're eligible, but you may very well be eligible. It's always up to you. There's need-based aid, and then there's loans and other type of aid. It's always at your discretion in terms of what you want to take. But don't let cost be a barrier for higher education, because for many students it is. We're here to help. Our financial aid offices will continue to provide remote assistance whenever we can. If you're having trouble reaching out to a campus, reach out to me, and I will make sure I get you connected with one of our financial aid offices, because that is a huge issue. I'm a former admissions counselor. I've interacted with many students who said, my mom lost her job, or we had a death in the family, or a car accident, or some other extenuating circumstances, financial aid offices have the ability to go back and revisit a financial aid package. It may not completely get you where you need to be in terms of your finance, but it could certainly, we can look at readjustment. And as I said, with the CARES Act, we have some resources from the federal government to help students there. So I really want to drive that message home to students and parents that we want to do everything we can to get you on one of our campuses this fall. So.
Hey, Paul, our next question is asked actually quite often here in the question index, which is regarding typically institutions have a requirement for freshmen to stay on campus their first year. Do you have a sense, is that requirement holding? How are the universities dealing with the freshmen on-campus housing requirement?
That's right. That requirement was put into place because what we found empirically is that students tend to have higher GPAs and better retention rates if they live on campus their first year. They're more engaged in the university community. But what my campuses have done is suspend that requirement for the coming academic year as a result. Because as I mentioned earlier, we will have very limited capacity in our residence halls. We're really focused on some of those student populations that I mentioned earlier. So as a result, students have that flexibility in order to stay at home if they feel comfortable. We know some students desire to be maybe in the geographic area of the university, maybe off campus. Please do plan accordingly. Plan for what works best for your situation. But yes, students will not be required to live on campus for this upcoming academic year for the fall term. So.
Thank you, Paul. That was a great update. A number of questions are coming in. I'll just give you a sense of what they're talking about right now. Testing, broadband capabilities, and others. So we'll come back to you in the lightning round as we get through the rest of the panel. But thank you for being with us this morning. Up next, we have Jan Yoshiwara. Jan is the Executive Director for the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. Her primary responsibilities are education policy and strategic planning for the community and technical college system, and management of the education division, including instruction, student services, e-learning, policy research, and performance accountability. Jan works with senior staff at colleges and universities, higher education, and K-12 agencies, including the governor's office, legislators, state businesses who are pleased to partner with her, and representing 34 community and technical colleges. Jan joined the system in 1984 and previously served as Associate Director of Planning and Information Services and the Assistant Director for Student Services and Minority Affairs. Jan, welcome on into our webinar. We're glad to have you here today. Take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. That long introduction just means that I've been around for a long time in the higher education space in our state. So I just wanted to make 3 points this morning. First of all, to talk a little bit about the community and technical college plans for the fall. So we just resurveyed the colleges to find out what their plans were for the fall. We have 34 community and technical colleges around the state. We have surveyed them 3 times because the conditions have been dynamic. And at this point, I think we can say that all 34 of our colleges will be hybrid, which means that they will be predominantly online with their courses, with the classes, and in person for lab and practicum classes with very strong health and safety protocols. So as Paul noted, our colleges never closed. We quickly moved instruction and student services online over spring break in March. So spring break was not a very long period of time to move all of our services and instruction online. We were able to do that because our college's faculty have almost 20 years of experience teaching online and the technology infrastructure to support online learning. So before COVID, about a quarter of the classes that the community and technical colleges offer were offered online. My second point is that our colleges now have some pretty good experience with offering hands-on lab and practicum instruction with strong health and safety protocols. So our colleges got permission to start reopening lab and practicum classes in May. So in March, over spring break, we put everything online that could be put online. And there are certain hands-on and practicum courses that could not be put online. And so we got permission to reopen some of those classes in May, and that was at first limited to programs that were linked to essential occupations. So healthcare programs is the primary example. And we worked with the governor's office, Department of Health, Labor and Industries, much as you all did, to define health and safety requirements that colleges would have to follow, including physical distancing, PPE, disinfection protocols, temperature checks, and contact tracing. Based on that experience, a month later in June, the colleges were given permission to reopen the rest of the lab and practicum courses for all workforce education programs, starting in June and into the summer. So many of those programs are now graduating students this month instead of in June because their practicum hands-on coursework was delayed until June. So restarting these programs has been very important for the community and technical college sector. 45% of our students are enrolled in workforce education programs to get direct job skills to go out into the labor force and work for you. And we want to make sure that we are continuing to have that pipeline of newly trained graduates out into the state's workforce. So over the past 3 months, our colleges have been able to gradually bring in small groups of students and faculty back to campuses and to work out safety protocols. So I am pleased to say that we've gotten some positive feedback from our unions about the college safety efforts, and that's built a lot of confidence over the past few months among faculty and staff and students for a safe return to campuses in the fall for those classes that are going to be offered with face-to-face instruction. So the third point I want to make is that the higher education community has been working collaboratively among the sectors and with K-12. So I do have to say that I think the frequency of my contact with Paul and Terri has probably gone up 10 times what it was before COVID. Because all of this is affecting us similarly, and we have joined efforts to try to compare notes and to troubleshoot in areas that are giving us all common challenges. So I'll just give you one example. One of our earliest efforts was related to nursing education programs and keeping nursing students on track to graduate in June for obvious reasons. So COVID was first detected, as you might recall, at a nursing home in Kirkland. And one of our colleges, nearby colleges, had 20 nursing students and faculty on clinical rotations at that facility and were unknowingly exposed to the virus there. So February 28th, we had direct engagement with the COVID pandemic. So shortly after that, clinical rotations at hospitals and clinics for nursing students were closed down due to COVID for health and safety reasons, and also because healthcare providers were pivoting to redeploy their staff towards COVID mitigation, understandably, and did not have time to supervise nursing and other healthcare students. So our state needed those almost 2,000 nursing students to graduate on time and to go to work in the hospitals and clinics around the state. The demand for their skills was obviously much higher even this summer than in the past. So Paul, Terri, and I worked together with our institutions and the state's Nursing Commission, which is the regulatory body over nursing education program standards. And together we were able to work with the Nursing Commission to get them to agree to substitute high quality simulation lab hours for in-person clinical hours for our nursing students so that they could continue to meet the requirements for practicum experience for high quality preparation for jobs in healthcare. Following that, we were able to secure temporary licenses for those graduates since the license testing centers were also closed down due to COVID. So there are many, many other examples of the three of us, the three sectors working together and working with K-12. And I think Terri is planning to add to that. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions, Chris.
Jan, thank you for being with us this morning. I want to pick up on an item that you mentioned. It's coming through in the questions. How are you and the 34 campuses engaging the employer community as we go through this period of COVID to talk about what types of skill sets they might need in a workforce, especially given a number of manufacturers pivoting recently to make things like PPE and masks and other important PPE issues that both students need, faculty need, and employers need. How are each of the campuses engaging the employer communities in their local community?
That is a very good question. So we are doing that in multiple ways. One is that each of our technical programs at the colleges has a local program advisory committee. And those advisory committees are made up of employers and labor representatives. And those folks provide feedback to the programs about what kinds of skills are needed in those occupations. The second thing is that at the state level, we are engaged in doing some work with the State Workforce Board and with the Student Achievement Council. We have also done some work with AWB and to try to get a fix on what occupations and industries are growing and are going to continue to grow under COVID, and which ones are shrinking. So we've been taking a careful look at the unemployment insurance data as an example to try to inform some of our decisions. The presidents have formed a task force to take a look at economic recovery planning. And what we want to do is we want to focus our capacity on a growing capacity in the areas of highest demand and shrinking the capacity in programs in occupations that are in decline. So this is one of the hallmarks of the community and technical college system, that we're good at this. And we know that with the state's budget challenges that we are not going to have, we can't count on extra resources to grow capacity in the highest demand programs. And so we want to make sure that the colleges have good information about what is growing in demand and what is shrinking in demand in their local communities as they take a look at their program and plans for this next couple of years.
Jan, our next question is, are you helping students with either access to broadband or access to the hardware to help facilitate online and virtual learning for this fall?
Oh, absolutely. So in the spring, when the colleges converted to predominantly online instruction, our colleges surveyed the students, contacted students, faculty, and staff as well, to find out if they had needs for devices or for broadband access. And to the extent possible, colleges purchased laptops, Chromebooks. I heard stories about colleges taking apart their computer labs because obviously students couldn't come to campus, but taking the laptops out of those computer labs and loaning them out to students, faculty, and staff who were now doing their work from home. Colleges purchased lots of hotspots for students, and in many cases, the colleges extended the Wi-Fi access out to their parking lots so that people who don't have broadband access at home where they live could drive to the campus to take their online courses in the college parking lot if they went, because they couldn't get into the buildings. So what I know that in spite of the best efforts of colleges, there are some students who have not been able to get broadband technology, Wi-Fi access, because broadband does not exist in their neighborhoods. And so we have been working with the Department of Commerce Broadband Office on their strategy to try to broaden broadband access and to tackle those deserts. And our institutions have been offering to serve as Wi-Fi centers for their communities, not only our main campuses, but our colleges have about 100 locations in communities around the state. And all of our institutions are willing to expand the use of Wi-Fi access more broadly out to the communities that it's surrounding the areas where those locations exist. So we are expecting in the fall that we will be able to reopen some of the classroom space. And so our colleges are preparing, putting those computer labs back together and with 6-foot physical distancing so that students who do not have broadband access at home or have so much other stuff going on at home that they don't have a quiet space to learn can come to campus and do that in the computer labs.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for being with us. Stay for the lightning round if you would. Up next is Terri Standish-Kuon. Terri is the president and CEO of the Independent Colleges of Washington, widely known as a committed advocate for students and higher education. She especially values the opportunities offered by independent, private, not-for-profit colleges and universities. Terri has been published in peer-reviewed journals, taught undergraduate and graduate students, and presented at numerous conferences. Terri, welcome on in. Take it away. Give us an update from ICW, if you would.
Kris, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So as Kris said, I'm Terri Standish-Kuon, and I'm President and CEO of Independent Colleges of Washington. Kris, I really want to thank you and the AWB team for organizing this conversation, and I did want to give a special shout out to Kris for his service on the Independent Colleges of Washington Board of Directors. Independent Colleges of Washington has 10 member campuses: Gonzaga University and Whitworth University in Spokane, Whitman College and Walla Walla University in Walla Walla and College Place. Heritage University has 2 campuses in the Yakima Valley and Tri-Cities, St. Martin's University in Lacey, PLU, Pacific Lutheran University, and the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, and in Seattle, Seattle University and Seattle Pacific University. These 10 campuses serve about 35,000 students a year. We have our majority of our students are Washington residents. And if you looked at the 10 campuses collectively, we would be a top 20 largest employer in the state of Washington. Just as echoing some of the themes that you've heard from my colleagues, Paul and Jan, and building on the collaboration that we've had with Superintendent Reichdel, I wanted to focus on 3 things this morning. One, a little bit more in detail about what the fall is going to look like from the experience of faculty and students and how we got there. A little bit more on the talent pipeline that Paul started us out on, and a little bit more on equity and some of the issues that Jan was raising. So first, just in terms of how we got to the reopening plans that each of our campuses are making, you heard Paul and Jan talk about the collaboration that we've had across sectors, and we really are grateful for the leadership of our college and university presidents who early on saw the value of collaborating. There was an 8-member group, a higher education leaders work group that looked at common issues. We wanted Washingtonians in all communities to understand that we were in this together and that we wanted to make decisions that were based on, of course, the local guidance of our local health jurisdictions. Though that 8-member higher education working group found good partners in Challenge Seattle and the Washington Roundtable. Together, we collaborated with the Boston Consulting Group and outlined a very detailed and very detailed plan that we were able to work with the governor and his team. And we really are grateful to Governor Inslee for his leadership in helping colleges and universities craft reopening plans that really take into account how different our students are and our communities. So that campus reopening plan ultimately was announced. Governor Inslee made that announcement in late June. And since that time, we've continued, of course, to collaborate with our local health jurisdictions so that the variety of plans that you'll see, and across our 10-member campuses, you've seen a strong focus on hybrid, blended courses. There are some campuses that will be largely remote this fall, so 90% and up. Remote. There are some campuses that are in areas of the state where they can safely feel like they can bring students back to campus in some revised residence settings. So if you'd like to see what the focus is for the campus in your region, or where you have either family members enrolled or you have employees with students attending, please do go to the icwashington.org website. We've got a particular COVID-19 landing page so you can see what is specifically the plan for the college in your region. But what that, for the faculty, staff, and the students who will be on campus, they are going to take that local on-campus daily attestation. So everyone will be screened at the beginning of their day. They will get in some cases, on their mobile device, a green flag so that they would be permitted to go to campus. Where there is a chance for in-person learning, and as you heard Jan say, that might be in some laboratory classes. One of the things that we're doing is that teaching spaces have all been configured to align with physical distancing, face coverings required. You'll see a lot of our campus leaders spend a lot of time just helping, particularly because of the spike of cases that we're seeing in 20 to 29-year-olds, that we know that college and universities have a good leadership role to play in promoting mask wearing. You'll also see students would see cleaning and disinfecting kits in the classrooms. You'll see that larger spaces that have been used for events or performances have been adapted for classroom use. And you'll see, as I said, this real blend between remote classes and those that are blended. So as our campuses have gotten ready, I did also want to acknowledge the terrific work of the Association of Washington Business with the PPE Connect. So some of you on today's webinar might have been participating in the PPE Connect, and I know that our campuses have found it a valuable way as they were looking to try to source, because of course the regular availability of testing supplies and a quick turnaround has been a really key metric as our campuses have decided what they can safely do to serve students. Switching to sort of the talent pipeline and where we go from here, I want to echo the comments that Paul made, particularly around our collaboration and making sure that families and students know that we want you to keep going with your post-secondary plans. So we've really been focused across all sectors on encouraging students to stay in school, to finish their high school program, to continue with their college plans here in Washington. Many of you know that we in Washington have long been a net exporter of high school graduates. So we're hoping in this window of time that if we can help keep our students here in Washington, that would be a really positive outcome of these really uncertain times. So we do want to make sure that that all of you on today's webinar have a chance to join us in promoting that college-going culture here in the state of Washington. And lastly, I just wanted to focus again on some of those really important equity issues. Right now, particularly among these really important conversations around racial justice and social equity, our colleges and universities, particularly speaking on behalf of my member campuses, are holding space and leading and learning with their communities. And so we want to make sure that all students, that our Black students, our students of color, feel supported and welcomed in a truly authentic way. So you've heard Jan talk about some of the work that we've done with broadband and equipment, and that is happening across all the campuses. But please, just wanted you to know that those conversations are ongoing so that we can really make sure that equity divides are bridged here in the state of Washington. So thanks. I see in the chat that we got a chance to link to that COVID-19 page. And Kris, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Terry. A couple, 3 or 4 things to let all of our participants know. We're going to run a little bit long today, hoping that all of our guests can stay with us. There's a lot of questions coming in. So just an FYI on that. We're also going to have a little bit more information on that 3 o'clock press conference. You'll see a slide later on in the webinar here. But Terry, let's a couple questions coming in around private colleges in the state. And the first one is someone asking a question about PLU offering a plus or a bonus year. Do you see other colleges and universities in the state doing the same thing. Can you share just a little bit more information about what that is that PLU is doing?
Absolutely. So the Pacific Lutheran Plus Year is a way, and again, all of this, I would encourage you again to go to that link that I see in the chat, that COVID-19. You'll be able to link through to the COVID-19 information. One of the things that Pacific Lutheran has done is said that any student who is enrolled for the 2021 year, because we know that with an online or remote environment or hybrid classes, that means that students for whom athletics or performing arts, music and plays and student clubs and just the really strong community and extracurricular activities that are so important to the students who come to our member campuses, really important learning that happens outside of the classroom. So what PLU did is essentially extend for students enrolled in the 2021 year. They can continue directly after the year that they would have finished for an additional 2 semesters so that they can be in residence on campus and have that full experience. So it's the PLU Plus initiative, and you'll find more on the PLU website. But just as Paul mentioned, if anybody has trouble finding some of the resources that I mentioned today, please just reach out to Terri at icwashington.org, and happy to make some connections for you.
Hey, Terri, I think this is a fairly easy, short answer here, but there's some ICW campuses coming back, planning to come back this fall. Is that correct? Maybe, I think Gonzaga, maybe one other.
So, Chris, thanks for that. Heritage University is working very hard to make sure that students have a chance to be in person in the Valley. Whitworth University also planning to bring students back. Gonzaga University students have a chance to make the decision that works best for them or their families. And the St. Martin's University, Seattle Pacific University also planning for in-person education. Again, that comes with residence hall configuration changes. And really, I'd want to encourage students and families to make sure that they were in touch with their campuses about the details of those specific plans. Those have all been developed in partnership with local health jurisdictions. And of course, all of our plans have really been a dial so that we can go up or back with public health guidance. But detailed plans are campus by campus. And so that's why checking out that COVID-19 link is so important.
Great, thank you, Terri. We're going to bring up all of our panelists online, kind of lightning round now. Superintendent, we're going to be coming to you first. And the first question coming in is, will the requirements for graduation be amended or changed for the 2021 school year? Do you see those requirements changing at all?
Not likely. The State Board of Education actually gets some control over that. They had some temporary waiver authority last year. The legislature would have to reenact it, is our understanding. So at this point, our students need to meet their credit requirements, their pathway requirements, any assessments that are still required. Again, even if we're remote or hybrid, we're back to school next year. All the grading stuff that was a real challenge last spring, we are back to trying to implement a very robust learning model, even though it's remote, and that means most of that framework comes back.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next question for you is coming from a person asking, they have a 17-year-old child with the IEP, wondering what types of efforts are being made for them to come back on campus this fall, or what type of needs and support will be available for both that student and their family.
Yeah, what the governor and I definitely worked out here in terms of his closure order from last March was that it wasn't renewed. So our buildings are open and available for supports right now. Each district obviously has a different deployment model every summer, even in a non-COVID year. But our goal here is to make our buildings available for exactly what's been described in the question. Districts can bring back small groups of students, one-on-ones. They need to figure this out locally, but it's an option. Last spring, we were literally shut down, and that was truly not an option. But that's happening now in a lot of districts, even through the summer, through jumpstart programs and transitions, and it will pick up in more earnest ways this fall. But anyone in that situation should contact their district and say, what is my option to either get consultation now, my IEP looked at, or perhaps even some direct support as soon as now.
Terri, let's maybe go to you first on this next question, and I'd like Jan and Paul to be able to jump in, and Chris, if you can as well. This question comes from a parent who says, my child's going to be on campus this fall. Will there be testing requirements either for the student or for the parents as we go to attempt to see our child on campus this fall?
Thanks for that, Chris. So testing protocols will absolutely be in place on campuses in consultation with the local health jurisdiction. So for some regions of the state are recommending gateway testing. So for example, testing for everyone as they move onto campus. Certainly the move-in situation, and I'm parenting a young adult, and I well remember what it was like to do that drop-off. So that will look different. I certainly want students and families to understand that it will look different. So check in with your local campus. For some campuses, there will be regular testing throughout the semester or term. We've got 3 of our campuses are on quarter and 7 on semester. For those campuses that do have residence life, for housing insecure students, for example, there are quarantine facilities so that if anyone does test positive, there are protocols in place. But again, that's why our campus folks are ready and standing by for questions. We really want you to reach out and don't be puzzled. Ask us.
Other panelists, anybody want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I think Terri did a great job of answering that question. I printed out, what does dining look like on just as one example on one of my campuses. And just some of the things that they've listed here. All employees required to wear masks. Health questions will be asked to employees prior to their shift. Temperature checks will be performed prior to the beginning of staff member shifts. Adjusted sneeze guards stacked as barriers between servers and customers. Touchless payment options. Enhanced signage in all locations focused on physical distancing and hygiene protocols. Strict cleaning and sanitation guidelines. So I think that's just one snapshot of what all of our K-12 schools and colleges, universities are having to think about as they make plans for the fall. So,
thank you, Paul. Terri, I know you may have to drop off, so if you do, I want to thank you for being with us this morning. I greatly appreciate it. We'll get any of the follow-up questions to you.
Yeah, I was just going to affirm both Terri and Paul's comments in K-12 protocol is every single student and staff member every day goes through a screening. Some of that will be done on campuses, but it can also be done as an attestation at home. A lot of districts are already adopting apps where parents will essentially say, I've done my protocol and my check. Any student who shows up without the app confirmed or some verification, they'll get a screening on the elementary, middle, or high school campus. So the other cool innovation out of all this, of course, is K-12 has long needed to do bulk purchasing. And now we've got all 9 of our regions purchasing common supplies and materials, saving a ton of money for taxpayers. We only hope we can use it. That sounds weird, but we can't use all of it if we don't fully open. And so let's get our cases down and get all of our students back.
Yeah, Jan.
I'll just add that we have trained staff at every college around contact tracing and how to set that up on campuses. Unfortunately, early on, a number of our colleges had experience with COVID positive students or faculty. And so this is high up on the screen for our institutions as they bring students back on campuses. And so all of the health and safety protocols that Paul and Terri mentioned are in place at our institutions, have been in place since they reopened for lab and practicum instruction. And the piece that has been added recently is training folks on how to do contact tracing on campuses as well.
Thank you, panelists. Superintendent, coming back to you, a number of questions coming in regarding Running Start programs and CTC. Maybe you can take the start of this. What impacts do you see to those programs going into the fall, and might that impact change between spring and fall?
Definitely want others to weigh in on this for sure, but we have the best dual credit system in the country. We have the best colleges and universities who've created multiple pathways for this. We expect it to grow. What has been clear to us as students have said, hey, if I'm going to be remote one way or the other, why don't I get college credit for this? and we have such high competency in that in higher ed institutions. So we expect it to grow. We're facilitating it. We're encouraging it. It's got another addition to it in terms of resource. It'll pay a little bit more this year, which is good as basic ed goes up. We want more of it. I'll hand it off there because it also means a complication in higher ed to make sure that those students are registered properly, given how sort of uncertain the start is for some districts. And it means those students definitely need to remember, like, they are almost exclusively going to be remote in that case. But I'll turn it over to others as well.
Jan, do you want to start and pick up there?
I would like to. We have seen an uptick in Running Start enrollments that we saw that in the spring, which was a little bit of an unusual pattern for enrollment. And our colleges are reporting that they are seeing more activity, more requests from students, high school students, to enroll in Running Start in the fall. And I think, as I said earlier, our colleges have a lot of experience with online instruction. We have all the infrastructure in place for online e-tutoring and e-reference librarian, testing, online testing, etc. So I think that, that before COVID, Running Start students were there were a lot of high school students taking advantage of online courses through Running Start. And before COVID, half of the Running Start students were taking at least one online course at our institutions. So I think this is a known phenomenon among many families. And one of our concerns is that when we look at participation in this really great opportunity for families and students to get a significant head start on college and their college costs, that we see that low-income students and students of color are participating at a lower rate. And so our institutions are putting more resources into outreach for those students. Colleges are utilizing foundation resources to pay for books for those students, for low-income students who can't buy their own. I think that the online opportunity is still an underutilized opportunity for people who have transportation barriers, whose families can't buy their kids a car so that they can drive to a community college campus. And so I think we have some assets here that we have been a little shy about advertising to high school students that I think present a great opportunity.
Great. We have two more questions, two more themes. I've had a lot of questions come in on them, and I'd love to get your feedback on that. The first one's regarding childcare. Given hybrid issues, late start, early start, some being in virtual, how are each of the systems engaging childcare providers in their communities or in their regions to talk about providing important access to childcare during this time?
Yeah, so I'll just add that I'll start with the governor really insisted on this kind of work last spring, knowing it was so disruptive so fast. K-12 opened up about 7,000 childcare slots. I think only about 5,000 of those were actually subscribed at the time. If you all recall, it was so fast and the private economy was being shut down so fast that a lot of families said, I'm home with my kids, and so I actually don't need it. I'm deeply worried about this. I've told the governor on no fewer than 4 or 5 times in the last month, whatever money he has in CARES Act today, whatever we might get in another stimulus bill, you have to focus on the child care system and the higher ed system. They are not protected in basic education law, and the K-12 sort of child care need, given that we're remote, and the birth to 5 is so fundamental to the labor market, getting people to work and supporting our employers, that I just think it is the biggest bipartisan opportunity that we have here. But as I said, higher ed needs to be taken care of as well, for their staff, for their students, and for the risk in the budget. So this is a big deal. Our districts have been tasked with coordinating that work in their communities. So they won't necessarily be direct providers if they don't have the skill set or they don't have the staff to do it. But we've asked them in our opening guidance to take a coordination role, connecting families who need it with places that it's available, But boy, we have to rebuild those small businesses and communities all over the state for those chances to be there.
And Kris, I'll just add very quickly, I thought the superintendent's answer was great. It's just really important to note that 28% of college students around the country are parents. Many people don't know that. This is an issue that dramatically impacts higher education. And there are more and more, what we used to call them non-traditional students, they're not anymore. They're actually the typical college student. And so my worry is that, as the superintendent was saying, my worry is these students say, you know what, I was going back to a community college or a four-year school to upskill or, get some additional training, but because I don't have childcare, I can't do that, and I'm going to have to drop out or reduce my credit hours. And so I think this is a major issue that we got to figure out here. I am worried about it. Each of my campuses has child care centers. Well, what does that look like in a remote environment, right? And so I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that has huge implications not only for K-12 but also for higher ed.
And I'll just add that, at the community and technical colleges, we have a more diverse age profile of students. So over a third of our students are parents, and our colleges have child care centers for students and parents. And those child care centers are especially important because part-time child care is the most expensive kind of child care around. And so we are able to organize the campus child care centers so that they're available to students on an hourly basis for the hours that they're in class, and that they need that child care and they don't have to pay for an entire day that they're not using. So the other part is that one of the areas where we provide job training programs is child care providers. And we are one of the largest providers of new child care workers into the labor force. And without a doubt, there is an unmet need for more child care providers for all the reasons that have already been stated. And one of our challenges is drawing people into those occupations, into those programs. It's not that we don't have them. It's because it's not known to be a high wage, career pathway program. And so, and yet, I have a granddaughter. I want her being taken care of by somebody who has had some skills training on how to work with young children. And so what we've done about that is that we've created a career pathway, an education and career pathway for people who love being with children, love working with children, so that there's a pathway to becoming into a bachelor's degree, to become a child care center director, or into teacher education to become an elementary school teacher. And so that's the way that we are trying to encourage and recruit people into those programs, is showing them that there is a pathway for you if you start as a child care provider.
Superintendent, this question's for you. The question, and this has come up a number of times, a number of themes here from our participant audience, is the decisions and guidance for private K-12 different than public K-12? And who does the governor have the final call, or do you have the final call on what happens in both systems?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't say this enough. Thank you for the question, because I answer it 50 times a day. I have zero authority to forcibly close schools at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. The governor can do that. A local healthcare provider can do that. A health authority or a local superintendent can close schools. The governor has the ability, when he makes his proclamations about closing, to apply it to publics, privates, charters, tribal compacts, all of them. So again, it's the governor's authority really on these big, broader, regional, statewide closures, and he can choose to make that public or private. In the spring, everyone was closed, public and private. What we again have tried to do is get him to stay focused on keeping the option of our buildings open and viable, and then letting locals make that decision. So at this point, unless something changes, districts are making decisions on their own whether to be open based on some health thresholds, and private schools and charter schools and tribal compact schools can make that decision independently. Even if they're in a community that's got high caseload, they can say, but we're really unique. We serve 50 students or 100 students, and we can do this effectively. We believe under the current framework they can do that. That's what we tried to create. If a local health authority, say Seattle-King County Public Health, comes along and says, nope, our cases have spiked above 75, they could shut down everybody. But that is not the scenario that we're under right now.
I want to thank the Superintendent, Paul, Jan, and Terri for joining us. We ran over today. We have a bunch more questions here. As you can guess, most of these questions come in are individualized. I have a person that's this, or I have a person that's that, or how do I access this? So on some of these, we're going to get them back to you so you and your teams have a chance to do some follow-up there. You know, I want to give us, I know we're running over, but just give each of you 30 seconds as we close out. This is, going back to school is a really important conversation in communities all across the state. Can you kind of share some parting comments to us about this very uncertain period of time we're in and the challenges that both the systems are working through and what you're doing to lead on as we talk about returning this fall? And Mr. Superintendent, let's go to you first if we can.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with everyone today and to kind of share where we are. It is everything. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's probably crass to use these words, but K-12 is in fact the greatest workforce development system. It leads to post-secondary opportunities, straight employment, and it is the largest system that underwrites the current labor market so that people can go to work and have their kids in a safe setting learning. We know how it underwrites everything economically. It's why our guidance was to open. Obviously, cases changed a lot and the anxiety really built around the state, not everywhere though. And so we're going to keep trying to navigate to how can we get students in our buildings, and if we can't in the short term, how do we make sure that the learning is really robust and more supportive than it was? I'm seeing really positive things out there, but we got to hang together. I mean, as Washingtonians, we've got to hang together on face coverings, physical distancing, hand washing, screening and cleaning. Like the better we do, the faster we open up the economy. But it's a huge deal. We understand how monumental it is, and I'm grateful particularly for all the private sector partners who have stepped up with technology access, equipment, childcare supports. It's been a really good public-private partnership trying to get to this moment.
Jan, let's go to you if we can.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll just add, I was unmuted, so I assume you were asking me. So our college, higher education is a part of economic recovery, and the community and technical college system is a big part of economic recovery for the state. And so this is why we have worked so hard to keep the colleges open, to keep students enrolled, and to help students to remove barriers that have been created by the COVID pandemic so that students can graduate on time and get out into the labor force. And we are doing everything we can to continue to do that. We know that from the last recession that the demand for skilled workers actually goes up, and that there is a greater demand for people with technology skills across industries, and this is where our colleges shine. And so we think that we have a big role here with helping the state get back on its feet and getting the kind of talent and skills into the labor force that employers need.
Thank you, Jan. Paul, let's go to you if we can for final comments.
Yeah, I would just say colleges and universities are engines of economic opportunity. Nothing is more important than investing in yourself with education. I firmly believe that. So as you heard from Jan, as you heard from Kris, we are here to support you in any way we can. I just want to reemphasize that. We know these are really difficult times, but know that there are a lot of high quality pathways in Washington, whether you're looking at an apprenticeship, a certificate, an associate's degree, a four-year degree, graduate professional degree, or maybe some type of certification, that we are here to help you meet your career and personal goals. I just want to add as well that as stressful as this pandemic is, I've been trying to think about how this is going to benefit us in the long run, that we're going to see more online student support services, that we're going to see finally a validation of online learning, right? It's not going to be seen as a stepchild anymore. So just know for everybody watching this that your colleges and universities are here for you. We want to do everything we can to help you achieve your personal and life goals. Thank you.
And thanks to each of you. We didn't even have a chance to get into the recovery conversation as much as we are in the kind of how do we rebound, how do we get ready for back to school, but the recovery conversation is going to be a really important conversation as we talk about reskilling up, getting the employer sector back open, and jobs moving again. So again, thank you to our guests for joining us, Mr. Superintendent, Paul, Jan, and Terry. Thank you for being with us today. Some wrap-up items as we're putting some slides up on the screen for you now to talk about what back to school looks like, and we'll wrap up here in just a second as we go forward. No doubt our world's turned upside down during this COVID period of time. On the screen now for you is the information about the press conference today at 3 p.m., where the topic of conversation will be about returning to health and returning to school. So 3 p.m. on TVW and Facebook is where you can find that information at. If our team can go to our next slide, so I just have a sense of the order of the slide deck, that would be helpful. Great, Policy Summit. Hey, one of our flagship events that we do every year, and it's an important event that we do, is to give you a chance to engage with thought leaders across the state of Washington, give you a chance to engage in the conversations, discussions about some of the most important policy items facing this state and facing the next legislative session. You'll have a chance to do so, just like this event, virtually from the comforts of your home, office, or car, or anywhere you might be. September 14th to the 16th. You can register today at policysummit.com. We have a great lineup of speakers. In fact, we think we have the most content we've had in some period of time for the annual AWB Policy Summit. Again, policysummit.com is the registration link. Thank you to our great partners at AT&T for making this be possible. Another important tool for you, and it was mentioned a couple times today, is the Rebound and Recovery website at reboundandrecovery.org. It's a great opportunity for you to purchase PPE through the PPE Portal Connect. So PPE made in Washington, for Washingtonians, by Washingtonians, that is there. There's also a step-by-step guide to guide employers as we go through each of these phases, to reopening, to bringing employees back to work, and to giving confidence to your consumers and your employees about a safe, reliable work environment. So again, great tools on both sides of that equation, on the PPE Connect and on the reopening guidance, and so much more that's there. So reboundandrecovery.org. Next is an important conversation before COVID, and certainly now, which is regarding housing. And so we will have an outstanding 5-part housing forum series. The first one begins on August 25th. You can register for it at awb.org. We have a number of important partners to this conversation, whether it be the counties, the cities, realtors, and others who've all collaborated to have a deep dive conversation about the state of housing across Washington state. So it's an opportunity for you to pick up on the conversation that we had last time. Again, I want to thank you for all the things you're doing in your community with your employees as we go through COVID-19. AWB.org is your resource for you. You have any questions, any comments, go to awb.org. We're here to serve you. Thank you for being with us today. We ran about 15 minutes over. My apologies, but great content for you and a lot of questions we didn't get a chance to get to. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.